we live? Oh,
Right
I guess
now?
we're live. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to Coffee Talk with Serge. I'm Audra Streetman here with Ryan Kovar and Shannon Davis, who just flew in all the way from Australia last night. So thanks for waking up to be here with us, even though you didn't know you were supposed to be
idea.
here.
Yeah.
There you go.
But yeah, we are broadcasting live from a suite in Las Vegas. We are here for Black Hat and Defcon. It's going to be a very fun and exciting and busy and chaotic week.
Very chaotic.
We're off to a chaotic start. So.
Mick, what are your thoughts? Mick?
Wait, where is Mick?
Oh,
He
that's
be
right.
here.
He's in
Airport.
He's in
Yes.
airport hell. So
Yes.
chaos starts early. For those of you who don't know, weather on the east coast of the U.S. has been rather horrific, causing a lot of delays. So many people are a little late in arriving this week, but I'm sure they'll show up eventually.
Yes. Well, shall we get started with our news stories?
I think so. Drew, roll clip.
All right. So our first story today is an update with Microsoft. So just last week, I believe, the CEO of Splunk publicly criticized Microsoft over vulnerabilities found 5 months ago. So they reported vulnerability to Microsoft. It was only just fixed after this public criticism.
Right.
And so the vulnerability is in the Power Platform custom connectors feature. It allows unauthenticated attackers to access cross-tenant applications, also Azure customer-sensitive data. And additionally, the CEO said his team found authentication secrets to a bank, which is obviously concerning, so that they actually demonstrated that you're able to do with this. They shared a proof of concept exploit code, also the steps in order to find vulnerable connector host names, things like that, how to coordinate posts and whatnot. So the Microsoft, like I said, they've fixed the issue. But this also comes after that other report about Storm 0558, which is a China-linked threat actor that somehow got a hold of a consumer signing key, was able to compromise email accounts of some high-profile government officials in the United States. And it's still unclear how that adversary got a hold of those signing keys.
And today is Patch Tuesday.
It is Patch Tuesday. So we're going to look at that probably right after this and
Yeah.
see what just came out. So what do you make of this? I mean, the timing.
It's, excuse me, for me, Microsoft has just had a really rough couple months. I know there's a lot of great people over there doing wonderful things. And it must feel like a little bit of a waterfall every day for them. So we'll pour out our instant response whiskey and such forth for the teams over there. But it is hard if you're a consumer of these tools to constantly get hit over the head with this. Like, you're supposed to be putting your trust somewhere. Once again, it's not Microsoft. You can say any vendor, but this is rough for a customer of a vendor to have to constantly go back and be like, are we actually protected? We're investing this money. How do we know? And if you're losing, if you're insecure because who you're trusting to secure you isn't, that becomes very hard for you to kind of deal with every day.
But, the typical vulnerability disclosure timeline is 90 days, and this took more like 120 days.
But it was even just the public kind of name and shame sort of thing that
Right.
then took it to actually get to that level,
Right.
which doesn't always happen. It's
No.
kind of disappointing in this instance. And again, Microsoft does a lot of good things, but why did it take that action to actually get this looked at?
Right. Yeah, I think it is concerning that the public outcry is what
Drove the response.
potentially, yeah, that's what it looks like anyway. And I'm sure Microsoft has a lot of vulnerability disclosures to deal with, and I'm sure that there's a prioritization there, but this does seem like a significant vulnerability based on what Tenable's reporting. So at least it's fixed, so customers don't need to do anything now, but was it compromised within that 5-month period? That's
hard to tell.
The question.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, we have another story. This is Zoom, also a company that is taking action over public outcry. So they're actually backtracking. Just the other day on Twitter, someone posted a screenshot of its terms of service for Zoom, saying that they plan on using customer data to train AI data sets without your consent. It's just kind of an auto opt-in feature, which a lot of companies employ opt-in by default. You don't have to choose to opt-in, you have to choose to opt out. So Zoom is actually backtracking now. They added a line to its terms of use saying that no audio, video, or chat customer content will be used to train AI without consent. So you would have to enable it to do that.
And that's going back 5 months, I think, since March was when they started that. And so who knows what's happened in that period? And are they going to keep the data from that period? What are the legalities around that? Can they use that, or is that all? I think
so. I think the fact that there is the terms of service makes it legal to use that
during
data.
That period.
Right, during that period. And now they've changed it. So anything from here forward, right? I mean.
Well, we're saying Zoom, but the reality is this could be any company, right? Like it doesn't, let's not throw Zoom completely under the bus. I think this is our new reality.
Yeah.
And I was talking to some people last week about AI. It's just kind of more of an open group think, like, how are you feeling about this? And as one person said, it's hard enough to get data out of a database today, but when you have a trained LLM, like there is no going in and surgically removing Shannon Davis's input. Like it's all been digitized into ones and zeros. Like there's
smeared across the entire LLM.
Like once you pour that essence in, there's no extraction. And coming from the public sector, as Drew, our lovely producer in the background, will attest to, when you have DoD or classified things that spill out of a classified realm and they enter into an unclass, you have to do a lot of work to delete the data. You have to go through. There's these audits. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens when there's a classified leak and it goes into an LLM? Like that could be completely tainted. That entire oh no, you have to start completely over.
Well, this is a huge story around that. I mean, from redacting data that goes into LLMs, all the rest of the stuff that we've been talking about around any of the generative AI tools. That how do we actually handle the data that goes in there and know what it's been trained on, know sensitivity, everything else. I think it's just very, very murky, and it will probably stay murky for a long time.
And we talked about this with the AI ethics and how people are now definitely saying we need to have ethics, ethics part of this, ethic models built in. But we talked about before, Western ethics may not be the same as ethics in other non-Western democracy countries.
Yeah.
And how do you account for that? As I always say, the Kantianism and utilitarianism tend to be Western ethics, but that may not be the module you want to install in Vietnam.
And it's really impossible as a user to go through every single application that you use and check the terms of service, make sure it aligns with what you're comfortable with.
Yep.
And when you add in the using your content and your data for training AI, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes all over the place, and to an extent where you can't do anything about it.
Well, it's not just AI, it's terms of service.
Yeah.
Who keeps up on that? And we were talking about it before. It's I should start a company that offers up monitoring of terms of service to then provide information to companies. It's such a weird space, and nobody reads all that legalese.
Well, there's been a couple movements to legislate that, to get that, I think in the UK specifically, but I'd kind of get down to I shouldn't have to be a lawyer to read your terms of service. It shouldn't be, someone printed it out, right? It's this big for the Apple.
Yeah. The reading, I can't understand the jargon. It's just too much. The time it would take to actually go through that, it's impossible. So, we'll see what happens.
I think it's like you said, we started with the word Zoom. I think you could just put in $ any company,
right?
Because this is the new reality.
Exactly.
Well, it's been the reality.
I mean, Shannon isn't even here. This is just an avatar.
Well, you want to hear something else scary about the future of deep learning specifically? So this is some pretty scary research from a British university. They trained a deep learning model. It can actually steal data from your keyboard keystrokes, the acoustics of that, and then have pretty high accuracy. I think it was 95% accuracy when you're using a smartphone to type. So what they do is they produce waveforms and spectrograms. I'm not sure what that is, but they take this from the recordings, and they're actually able to visualize differences in each keystroke and perform data processing. It sounds very complex, but they're able to augment the signals and basically determine what keystrokes you're making. So they could steal your passwords. They could find, sensitive content that you're typing.
And that's even from just touch screens. So not even clacky keyboards and mechanical keyboards you can understand.
Just the haptic.
Yeah. So it was 95% accuracy for a smartphone, 93% for Zoom. Skype was the lowest, I think, at 91%. So in terms of defense measures, you could put some white noise in the background, they said, software-based keystroke and audio filters. But it doesn't have to be a mechanical keyboard. If you have a silent keyboard, like you said, you can still.
Which is weird. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's scary.
Just whale sounds playing in the background all the
time.
It
reminds me. You probably haven't heard of this, but Shannon probably. When somebody figured out that you could actually recreate the data passing through a switch based off the lights.
Yeah.
So the lights on the switch were always like, I always thought they were just like busybody lights, like, something's happened. They were actually representing
LED,
the ones and the zeros.
Yeah.
And someone figured out like, if you actually record that, you can actually start figuring like writing the data path. That obviously wasn't the best thing in the world because a lot of data centers, they try to look really cool. And so they have like rows of the servers with the blinky lights. Like I used to give tours to VIPs who were like, we want to see where the data is. Like, cool. This is a computer rack. And so like then we had to put in like blinky front lights so that they
to make it look impressive.
Like, so it was literally just like pew data center lights, like LEDs. So yeah, this one years ago I took a biometrics course and he talked about that as being like, this is not explicitly new, like this has been around for a while. But the deep learning one I think is going to make it more accurate, and the silent part is what
is terrifying.
I wonder what frequencies is picking up that it can hear that.
Yeah.
Also, all the deep learning things that we're getting, just like we talked about augmentation of people, that there's the speed at which it can actually do these things. It may have taken you like months or years to actually do this stuff in traditional ways versus putting it into these tools now that can do it much faster. So it's actually worth doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of these things come out now because it is worth doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing with quantum. It's not that quantum is, it's not 100% there yet, but it's more the terror of like, we thought this was encrypted, even though it was stolen, we thought it was fine, and now it's
for
not.
80,000 years, and now if it can potentially be done in 1 second or something. Yeah.
And I guess it really underscores the importance of like multi-factor authentication, other ways that can, if someone gets your password or something like that, where they still wouldn't be able to access your account.
For our friends at Okta trying to push the phish resistant, because multi-factor isn't multi-factor.
Right.
So you need to actually look at better
phish
ways.
Resistant,
exactly.
Yep. All right. Well, those were our news stories. We have a couple upcoming events if we have that graphic, Drew. A few events. One of them is today, which is exciting. We have a social for Splunk. This is happening at the Flanker Kitchen and Sports Bar in Vegas from 6 to 9 o'clock tonight, Pacific time.
We will be there.
Yes, we will be there.
Am I?
Shannon is singing.
Shannon's like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be.
I have no idea.
Shannon, you're still in Melbourne.
Yeah.
You're the avatar.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So,
Shannon puppet.
So that's happening tonight. It's going to be a lot of fun. Again, Flanker Kitchen and Sports Bar. And then we have our Blue Nomicon book signing tomorrow. This is at 4:30 Pacific p.m.
Shannon will be there.
Yes, Shannon will be there.
Nothing to do with Blue Nomicon, but I'll be there. Yeah.
We actually have quite a few authors who are going to be there, right, Ryan?
Yeah, absolutely. I will be there. I wrote the whole book. Apparently.
Of course, it's all your project.
Thank you.
Mick had nothing to do with it.
You had nothing to do with it.
Here,
23 authors. Yeah. Mac had nothing to do with it. No, me. I'll be there. Several of the authors. You, Mick, a whole bunch of the Surge folks and Splunkers and the authors. So it'll be a fun time.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anything else we want to highlight this week? I know we have a few interviews.
Don't you have a podcast coming out?
Oh, yeah, I have a podcast coming out tomorrow. Thank you so much for reminding me. Of course, I knew that was happening.
Shannon, you'll be there.
But Shannon will be there for me.
I'm just going to leave. Just stand up
Yeah, so this is a podcast. It's called The Security Detail that we just launched in June. And every episode is about a different industry and the threat landscape for that particular industry. So tomorrow, I believe we have the healthcare industry is going to be the focus of that episode. We interviewed the director of threat operations for the healthcare ISAC. So that's going to be really interesting to listen to. He had a lot of really great insight.
Yep.
I mean, probably one of the few people at the forefront of industry-wide cyber threats for healthcare, which is very timely because we just had a cyber attack that impacted hospitals in at least 5 states that just happened, just kind of showing how big of a problem this is. Operators used to say that they weren't going to target hospitals, but just like we saw the other day, it's still happening.
They were impacted by the SBOM, right? I mean, there's very few mandated places that have to have SBOM, but healthcare manufacturing devices was the first.
Yeah, the FDA is mandating basically SBOM for any new medical devices, which will be interesting to see how that rolls out. I think in October is the deadline to start doing that.
And that's new because healthcare is similar like banks, not the ones where you have stuff that's super, super archaic that's been there for, decades running in the hospital. And so for the older stuff, how do we actually handle that? That's a big problem.
Definitely.
Big problem.
All right, well, let's go ahead and transition and get our 60-second charity challenge.
And now, Splunk Cybersecurity 60-Second Charity Challenge. Remember the rules. You've got to get through an entire subject in 60 seconds, or you donate to today's charity of choice. Good luck!
All right, so today's challenge is fun. It's very timely. We are talking about Black Hat and Defcon and B-Sides and all the events that are happening this week in Vegas. What measures does a person need to take? What should their threat model be when they come here? Should they be concerned about attempts to hack into their devices while they're at these conferences? Is that a realistic threat? So we're talking about threat modeling because you hear a lot about this on Twitter, like, should I not bring my phone into the conference area?
Should I wear socks?
Should I wear socks?
I do.
No, no socks.
Audra? Yeah, sockless.
Sockless. So that could be part of your threat model. So yeah, we're going to compete on that. Do you want to go first, Ryan?
Yeah, it's Audra and I. And what's the charity this?
Oh, the charity is the Diana Initiative this week. So
I went yesterday. It was a phenomenal event. For those of you who haven't been, definitely worth it. Really great for folks at all levels of your career, especially early career though. A lot of great resources that we saw there. So, and then Shannon, you're judging and you're also our timer for the day.
Yes, I'm doing both.
Wow.
So I will start the timer in.
who's going?
Me or you?
You. Not me.
Okay. Ryan, in 3, 2, go.
So I personally believe that the entire idea about the threat modeling for Defcon is completely over, just it's way too much. For the most part, you can absolutely walk around with the same sort of reasonable fear that you have for any environment that you're in. Most of the folks who attend Defcon are really just there for the festivities and having a great time. So for me personally, I just try not to bring anything that I want to lose. It is a high risk area from a theft point of view. You have a lot of people walking around. I don't take any personally huge precautions. I don't tend to bring a laptop just because I'm not working on the floor or doing things there. And for my phone, I just usually try to remember to disable Bluetooth and try to remember to disable Wi-Fi. But once again, once you're on the conference floor, you can pretty much give up any sort of thought of calling anyone or receiving data just because it's completely saturated and people are playing shenanigans on the area. So for me personally, I don't take anything more than my normal precautions.
All right. Well, I have a different take.
Really? I am shocked. I am shocked to hear this.
All right. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Well, to say that specifically 0 days, people talk about, would someone burn a 0 day at Black Hat or Defcon? And most people are very dismissive, at least Ryan and Mick are. They're like, no one would ever burn a 0 day. I think that that's a little bit dismissive. Just because it hasn't happened recently, or we don't know that it's happened recently, doesn't mean it can't happen. And I do think that there is a higher threat when you're in this environment with people for a hacking conference. I think your risk of being hacked at a hacking conference is higher than your daily environment to a degree. What that degree is your own threat model, and that's your own assessment, and you have to decide what risk you're comfortable with. So I imagine there are quite a few attendees who are high value targets for adversaries, whether they be high profile journalists who cover topics that are widely read, or people who work for organizations that deal with human rights issues. Those are all high value targets. People know that they're going to be here, and therefore they could be targeted. Personally, I did not bring a burner phone. I did not bring a Faraday bag. Oh gosh, I'm at a minute.
Yep, so I automatically win.
No, I'm done. That was the end of my sentence. Yeah, but I was going to say I use a VPN when I'm on public Wi-Fi. I turn off Bluetooth. Normally? Well, I do normally, but like these are like the basic steps I take, which I would do, normally.
So it sounds like your threat model is about the same.
It's about the same, but I'm not a high value target, I don't think. So it's your own risk.
Extremely high value to us.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. It's very sweet. So anyway, that's my take. What do you think, Shannon?
Who won? I have my answer.
I've got to be careful here. So being my manager and
Doesn't stop Audra from dealing me daily losses.
You can't let that affect your decision.
We can have Drew, the voice of God in the background, who doesn't work for me. Drew,
have we ever done this before, where you both win and you both have to pay?
We have.
Well,
have we? Because I agree with both of you here that it's something that I think just taking precautions. I'm like you, Ryan. I'm not going to sit there and do a bunch of crazy stuff here because I don't think that people are going to, weigh something they can make X number of dollars off of just on a prank. Yeah. But I agree with you, Audra, as well, that if you're that type of person where they may target, I think you're going to be targeted anyway. I'm going to give it to Ryan.
Drew, what are your thoughts? Drew gives a meh.
Yeah.
Unsure.
I think you're both wrong.
Oh, okay.
The voice coming out of the back.
I can't articulate why.
Okay. So we're both wrong, but we're right because he can't do better.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
All right.
We'll both donate then.
Shall we both donate to Diane Initiative?
That's what I said. I want both of you to donate.
That's.
Now
I mean,
Shannon has to donate too.
now Shannon has to donate.
How much am I donating?
$60.
American?
American.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it's like 3,000 Australian.
Let me check and see what it's at today.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's
So
always
65
interesting.
cents.
I will say what I like your point. I think you actually won, if I'm honest, because you actually went through the threat model part where I didn't. And I think, the years that we've had like a senator at Defcon or House of Representatives or folks like that is a different, like they may actually be being targeted, but not by, and this is where I'll disagree with you. Like those people that I totally see truth sniffing on, like walking by
Pranking stuff.
yeah, or because they disagree with their politics.
To be clear, I don't highly likely that there's going to be a 0-day used at Black Hat, like in fact, number of people or something like that. I don't think it's likely, but I also don't want to dismiss it as nothing, because I think sometimes if we're too dismissive, we can overlook certain levels of risk or certain possibilities, right?
I think it's that risk kind of level. So whether somebody's going Faraday bags for everything, doing all these crazy things, or just taking appropriate precautions that Ryan said, like you should be doing anyway, that we say, just because you're here, doesn't mean you shouldn't be doing some of those basic things day to day.
Yeah. If you own a Faraday bag, where would you use it?
Diving. I don't know. They're usually
I'm like, the only use case like I could think of this week, I don't know, like unless you like work in a capacity where you need one.
Foreign airports, things where you're actually going through some of these things where they say, look, you walk through like a metal, ring, going through like an airport, that's potentially doing some sort of collection. It's everything else.
Yeah.
If you're worried about that kind of stuff, then take those precautions.
I think also the DEFCON itself has changed compared to what it was like 20 years ago, where it was a little bit more aggressive. 25 years ago, it was a little bit more raw. Now it's a lot been inclusive, and I think just some of those aspects have been polished off a bit more.
Some of the stuff we got away with back then, a bit different than.
And I will say, some people enjoy being paranoid. It's actually fun for them. I think in this industry,
really can't imagine anyone.
I think so. If you want to bring a burner phone, if it makes you happy, like go for it.
Of course. Your personal choices are always welcome.
Exactly. So with that, should we move on?
Shall we deep dive?
Yes, let's go ahead and do our deep dive.
And now we talk about things that just happen to be on our minds with who's ever here, because we made this up before I knew who'd accept my meeting invite.
So today's deep dive, this is CISA recently released their top routinely exploited vulnerabilities for 2022. And unsurprisingly, we had the Fortinet SSL VPN vulnerability, the proxy shell, Atlassian Confluence, and of course Log4j. Very well-known and researched vulnerabilities, also very commonly exploited.
Was Move It in there?
This is 2022.
Oh, sorry.
So,
wait, next year.
Next year, yeah.
Next year.
But it does raise the question from an organization's point of view, how do you prioritize patch management? Because these are all top routinely exploited, but how do you determine, am I running this? What's the likelihood of this impacting me? How difficult is this going to be to remediate? Will it break anything? And another vulnerability that's worth highlighting is the Mobile Iron Core, the Endpoint Manager Mobile. It's a MDM software. There was three vulnerabilities that came out in the last couple weeks about this, two of which are 10 CVSS scores, which is the highest score. But CVSS scores don't represent the whole picture, right? No. This MDM vulnerability, it can be chained with another vulnerability to do all kinds of bad stuff. So something to watch for. Our threat research team actually just put out content on this. If anyone's interested in learning more about that, they just released it.
And playbooks and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I'll link that here in a little bit. But so that's something to keep in mind. But what do you think, Shannon? Like when it comes to like evaluating vulnerabilities, what's the best way?
There's any best way, and I think it's like kind of know thyself really in this aspect that we run through our rapid responses. Like you guys know that we have a rubric of a number of steps that we follow in terms of like CVSS scores, chatter in the industry, all these different things, and that's never perfect.
No.
And so we're all still trying to work out the best way, and that's just us. So for an organization trying to understand if the Move It vulnerability or Log4j or something else would impact them, understanding what they're running, understanding the context that it's running in, understanding, if they got impacted, what would it mean? I think that's a big step. Is like, kind of assume breach, assume that thing is impacted. What sort of stuff down the chain could happen? Because I've seen a lot of good things. Like one of the recent ones was from Dragos on their OT state of affairs, whatever they called it. It was a really good report from last year where they talked about vulnerabilities, and this is specific for OT, where they said just because it's a critical vulnerability, it doesn't mean you have to patch. And I know we say patch all the time, but a number of times you can get away with these if you have some way to mitigate the vulnerability, maybe a better way than just patching. Because patching,
Log4Shell right off the bat, right? People realized they could put the application firewalls in place, and then we'll deal with the patching later.
Exactly, because patching a lot of times can break things. Like we've been involved in that in our jobs over the years, where you get told to patch something, you patch it, then you're up for 16 hours trying to backtrack and fix
100%.
what the patch broke. So just because it's saying it's severe, you have to understand how that's going to impact your organization.
Yeah, and even knowing, do you run this? Having an inventory, how many organizations actually have that inventory to determine
asset management's tough.
Right.
And the historical or old VM, like we've saw this quite a bit in my life. Like you have old VMs that aren't turned on all the time. You think you patched everything. Someone boots up a VM machine, a VM of something, and it's just running. And unless you do another scan to find out, like, oh, do I have vulnerable software? Like, absolutely can get mined with a lateral movement from a VM that turned on. Or it could do lateral movement itself, as I found out years and years ago with Configure. We had a loaner laptop that hadn't been turned on for 10 years. Somebody turned it on, plugged it in the network, and Configure started.
What's old is new again.
Yeah, it was.
And it also
Spanish flu.
Yeah, it extends to third-party risk too. Like, do you do vendor assessments and surveys to find out what they're using? So if a really big Log4j happens, are you able to quickly discern, could this represent a supply chain attack? Because that's one of the big concerns too for a lot of CISOs is third-party risk, because that's a lot of ways.
Well, this is that SBOM. Like if we all had SBOMs for all the software, you could have that pretty easily identified. One of the things I found interesting about this CISO report, like I think it does give a great place for people who are just trying to figure out how to prioritize to start. Where I think if I give a criticism to CISA on it, is it doesn't really show the why. They're saying those are the top exploited vulns, and they're getting data from NCSC in the UK, and I think ACSC in Australia, a couple other places, but there's no like showing your data, which I guess just the academic in me, I'm like, I want to know, are you seeing this from your operating agencies? Are you seeing this from, we see this from takedowns, or we're watching traffic and we're seeing this virus or this type? Like I don't disagree with any of the names that they put on there. I just can't tell if it was qualitatively like we think this was the best or the worst, or if it was quantitatively done of, hey, in 20% of organizations that we defend or have telemetry on, we saw these issues.
Yep.
And
one of the other things, and it's worth pointing out that as a team, Surge, we struggle sometimes when a vulnerability comes out. There's a lot of internal discussion.
Yeah.
How do we respond? Do we do a rapid response? What could be the outcome of this? And Move It is a great example of when that first happened. First of all, it was like, how common is Move It software? Where is it mostly utilized? And we're learning now that if there is an easily exploitable vulnerability that ransomware groups can leverage to just spray and pray, target a ton of organizations, that's a significant concern because of the outcome. So and sometimes I think it's hard too to create like a repeatable process, like a rubric, because there's a lot of nuance with this as well. So like sometimes if you have a rubric, that's great as a starting point, but then to add in like a discussion and a back and forth to get everyone's input on like, why do you think we should? Why do you think we shouldn't? And sometimes that helps. I don't know. That's my stance on it.
Well, it's not cut and dry either. It's something that when you're starting to evaluate it, to understand, okay, well, are we going to patch this? How long are we going to have before we patch this? Are we going to test? Are we going to do all these other things? And trying to get companies to actually do it's tough. Like
I've never worked anywhere that did patch Tuesday. You did patch Saturday. You did Q&A Wednesday. Pray Thursday, Friday, and then really horrible Saturday.
Lose your weekend trying to fix it.
Praying, installing on Saturday, and then fixing on Sunday, and hoping you were back up for business by Monday. So and I don't know. I haven't done patch management for a while in my career, but I can't imagine it's too different for people. I'm going to assume they're still not just downloading every patch every night and just installing it.
No, and it's unfair for us as an industry to tell people you just have to just constantly patch without
Right.
understanding the difficulties in that. So yeah.
Well, I think we've talked about it before. I think we talked about it on the panel a couple weeks ago. But one of the most fascinating things I ever saw a CISO do was one of the ways he changed his business was he figured out that people who did the patch management in this giant global financial organization were the worst paid people in the IT help desk. And he's like, yeah, so we'd have 70% of the fleet patch at any one time, but the people in charge of it were not motivated to do it. No. And so instead of buying a $400,000 appliance to scan and find all this stuff, he just basically said, if you have over 95% of your responsibilities patched, you'll get a $5,000 bonus every month. And so he paid out $25,000 per month, but they went up to 98, 99% patching because he just had someone who was paying and caring a lot more attention, which was for him super cheap by comparison, but
could be good. But you get people going crazy and patching, and, and then patch too quick, and it's something that
it's an interesting debate. But I mean, no, over 95% is about as good as you're ever going to get for
I think
fully
it's really
patched,
good.
right?
It's something that patching is better than not patching, and I think it's just having some intelligence around that is necessary.
And then also staying on top of the vulnerability, because sometimes new information comes out, like that mobile iron core. The third vulnerability, at first they said it's only non-supported versions that are affected by this, and then we learned just a few days later that no, actually all versions.
We've seen this quite a bit. I mean, we saw this for Log4Shell. We saw this for SolarWinds. Like this slowly, actually, no, there is more exposure.
Right.
And even Move It. I mean, Move It was a
moving
goalpost.
Yeah.
Well, because once you find that one, and then people start like interrogating that software, and then you find one vulnerability, another researcher comes in and finds this one, and then it's kind of dominoes at that point because software, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be vulnerabilities.
Yeah, a lot of times it's cut and paste, right? So like, this method worked here on this library.
Let's tweak it a little bit, and then
find another library that has that same whatever it be. That's interesting. I do look at it as, we talk a lot about like how did people start, like we talked a lot about where to threat hunt. Like I think this is another great place. Like if you want to see like let's create some hypotheses for threat hunting, like a great place to start would be like, okay, let's look at the indicators, let's look at the TTPs of proxy shell, like what adversaries are using this, hey, let's go into MITRE, let's find out which adversaries are using this attack. Okay, let's reverse that and say like, hey, we're going to broaden the scope here. We know they use this. Here's how they get in. Here's the ingress. Here's the egress. What are the TTPs for this adversary? Let's start a threat hunt. And that's a great place to start if you don't know where.
Those are vulnerabilities. Like I think maybe we've talked about this on the LLM side, where that is a way for adversaries to use those tools to quickly, reverse those changes. And then if you want to go and say, okay, put all those, the other libraries, like you mentioned, up into Code Interpreter on Steve or ChatGPT, and say, let me know if any of these other libraries have a similar, doesn't have to be the same, similar, or is there another method? And that's what I found a lot of the tools really good at doing that sort of stuff. So I'm not giving the hints away to the bad guys, but it's just something we have to watch out for on vulnerability detections.
Yeah, and even just backtracking to step one in inventory, right? Like make that priority number one.
It's one of the basics. Cyber vegetables kind of thing. It's hard.
And I'm supposed to sleep 8 hours a night and have 10 ounces of water per hour.
But make that like at your approach.
Day.
The top priority is to at least have that inventory so you can quickly determine
one of your top priorities.
Well, I mean, for patch prioritization, that's the top.
I mean, I would say like I love it as a priority, but it's also disingenuous, I think, as an industry when we kind of say that, because I've never 20 plus years, 24 years, I've never worked anywhere where everyone knew what
everything that was in there.
Everything's in there. And I say this all the time. That's not on you. Like, I'm not saying it's just more like,
I think that's like, maybe that's what we need to move our attention to then. Because if you have that inventory, or at least like you're making an attempt to create an inventory, it might not be complete, but you're putting that information together.
The process, and it's something you should. It's a constant thing you need to be doing.
It's the direction toward SBOM, right? Like we're not going to get to SBOM if we don't even have the inventory, right? Like
you're not wrong about that. And to Shannon's point, like I actually think the hardest part is not the getting to know all your assets one time. It's the
ongoing,
month afterwards that like I knew one place that would do they had a regex in email that looked for basically serial numbers for laptops. And because they didn't get information back from the help desk, but when they actually registered, the help desk would register the laptops for service warranty, then that number would get emailed out. And so they started doing basically creating a database by regexing these people's emails on the outbound. of like, oh yeah, we've just found a new serial, like, and then they go back every month to help desk, like, hey, do you have nope? We have no. What about these 45 new? Oh well, yeah, but they're just replacements.
Or even like if you're looking at an inventory, looking at business critical software and then software that holds sensitive data. Start there, put that list together, and then move out.
That. Like Octave, I think, is really good at that. These qualitative risk assessments, and that's part of what you would do to go through and say, okay, I can't know everything, but I should know who has access to our core code, and I should know our VIPs, and I should know
public facing. All
exactly.
These things,
and then that way you can prioritize your inventory to prioritize your patching, right?
And now we have a list of things that if you haven't patched yet for those prioritized assets, you're in a better place.
Yeah, and it's like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good, right? As long as you're making the effort to try to build an inventory, it doesn't have to be complete, it doesn't have to be encompassing.
What's the team motto, right? Fail less. This is
fail less.
Six Cyber Sigma.
But anyway, I don't want to get too preachy about it, but I'm just trying to think of solutions, right?
Well,
like,
I mean, you could Tom Cruise this, just jump off on the couch and start shouting your,
move it.
Solid.
Well, anyway, I think that's all we have. Is there anything else you want to add, Ryan?
I'm ready for a drink. It's Vegas. It's 11:30. So
11:30.
Bar is open. Time. We're good to go. But no, we're about to head over to the Black Hat floor, Mandalay Bay. So if you're in town, or you will be, let us know. Like I said, we have the social event tonight. Book signing tomorrow. Shannon will be all over everywhere without knowledge.
Everywhere.
Yeah. It's actually his eye. It's the giant floating eye out on the strip right now. So omnipresent Shannon. Unlike not present Mick.
Oh.
Hopefully you're watching us.
Yes, hi Mick.
Choose your airlines.
Choose your airline. Great. So I think we're pretty much all done for the day. Thanks all for coming. And Drew, take us away.
Are we done?
No. We might still be live. We are live.
Oh,
Shannon, I can't believe you.
you're hot. You got to be careful.
Yeah. Is that your llama?